Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar for today. We are just waiting for everyone to join us, and then we will be kicking off. As you know, today we're going to be really diving a little bit deeper into how to appoint the ideal director for your board. And I'll be introducing my fellow panelists shortly, and I'm really excited about the conversation today. I think it's going to be very interesting, because whether you have a newly formed board or you have an existing board, there are fundamentals that apply. And I think this is going to be the interesting conversation today when we dive deeper into it. Just a little bit of housekeeping issues, I think, whilst we're waiting. There is a Q&A session at the end. So Firdaus is going to keep us informed of the questions when they come through at the end. There's a short poll and the opportunity then to dive deeper into the questions that you would like us to address this afternoon. We should be finishing off by 4:30 CAT time, definitely. And we look forward to sending you some great information at the end of this as well for everyone that has joined us. So looking forward to that. Let me just see if there's anything else. Ladies, are you ready as well?
Born ready.
Oh, I love that. I always use that line. That is my line.
High five then.
I always use that line, born ready.
Well, we're definitely going to have double trouble then. That's all I'm going to say. All right, everyone. I think, Firdaus, are you happy if we start formally with our conversation today, or should we wait a little bit longer?
I think if we give the attendees about 2 more minutes to come online, then that should be good for us to start at 15:35.
All right, absolutely perfect. Well, while we're waiting, if you can let us know where you're from, that would be fantastic. We're sitting in different parts of South Africa at the moment. Oh, in fact, and Kenya. My apologies, Kata, where are you at the moment? In Kenya?
Yeah, I'm in Nairobi at the minute.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Caroline, you're in Joburg?
Not at all. I'm in Bloemfontein right now.
And I'm in Cape Town. So we really do have a very mixed bag today. And we look forward to then everyone joining us from, yes, weird and wonderful. Fantastic. Great. So you're from sunny Pretoria. Lovely to see that. Thank you for letting us know. Please do keep us posted as to where you are. And then we will. So we are sitting in all far different corners today of the world. I think let's sort of start kicking off. And really today what we're going to do is I'm going to make formal introductions. We'll go over again in terms of what we want to dive into today. And then I'm going to put a presentation on to do the introductions and then take it off, because today is a round conversation. Today is a really deep diving into what have been your experiences? What have you seen? What do you see in the market? And I think that's going to be the important discussions to have, to be able to take away some really good outcomes and takeaways for everyone that is listening in today. So I'm just going to bear with me while I share my screen. Okay. Let's get that done. So I just need to do the slideshow. Right. So can everyone see that? Okay, fantastic. All right, once again, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to us diving deep into the conversation around appointing your ideal director. And oops, apologies for that. I'm going to step back with that. Right. Can you all see me? All right. Okay, I'm going to just share the screen again. Unfortunately, I can't see you when we are together. All right. So essentially, we can actually leave that off for now because the priority here is really looking at what we're going to talk about today. And that is why a board of high performers does not guarantee a high performing board. Then we're going to look at what makes for an effective board. 5% or defining your ideal director. What are the missing pieces? What does ideal mean to you? And what should we be looking for? And what do we avoid looking for because we're concerned it's going to change up the game too much? And then really ending with the 5 essential steps in the board appointment process. So today, I am really, really pleased to be joined by Kat Berry of Mowgli Mentoring. Hi, Kat. And Caroline Mbi-Njifor. Thank you very much for joining us. If I can ask each of you to take a few moments to actually introduce yourself and why you're here, why the conversation is important for you today. Kat?
Sure. Thanks, Bev, and hello to everyone who's joining us today. So as Bev said, I'm Kat Berry, and I'm the CEO of a specialized entrepreneur and corporate leader-focused mentoring organization. And we work across Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the UK. And my journey of late has been an interesting one because I recently took over the organization. So found myself wearing 3 hats, which Sirdar provided me with the terminology for, which is the owner hat, the board member hat, and then the CEO hat. And I think I've never really been on an effective board before. And so I didn't really know what it all meant. And so I basically wanted to learn. And so I joined the Sirdar program. And then I've also gone through a bit of an board expansion plan over the last year, where we've actually taken on 4 new board members from across different backgrounds, different parts of the world. And to be honest, I was really excited about sort of sharing my journey and also hopefully learning from others in this session as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kat. Caroline.
Good day, everyone. My name, as Beverley's indicated, I'm Caroline Mbi-Njifor, and it's a privilege to be here this afternoon. I am a director. I've been for the last almost a decade and a bit, not giving away my age. And it's such a privilege. I've been with Sirdar, part of the Sirdar program, for a while as well, just over a decade and a bit. And it's I've sat in several boards in several sizes, different industries. And it's an absolute privilege to share some insights with you this afternoon. My background is in healthcare policy and management. I come from public health and private healthcare. I call myself a public-private health advocate. Besides my executive hat, I have held several positions, and I'm very passionate about good governance, extremely passionate about good governance. And so this conversation lends itself very naturally to what I believe. And I look forward to it, and I look forward to the questions as well. Thanks, Beverley. And it's a pleasure to be a co-guest with Kate this afternoon.
Absolutely. And it's wonderful that you are with us today. I think there's so much value that can come through the conversations. Myself, Beverley Hancock, I'm a partner with Sirdar, and I head up the appoint practice. And so for me, board appointments and intelligent matchmaking is really, really key and very important to me. I think I've seen situations where, it doesn't work with boards, and it's how do you find the right people to sit on that board. And I think it's a very important conversation, because it's easy when you either have an existing board, it's a new board, to just go and look out for friends or referred someone that's referred to you because they're great on another board, or even your consultant, suddenly fantastic, but they're not there for the strategy. about the bigger picture and understanding why they're sitting around the boardroom table. So that's really, it is my passion and my love, and it's a pleasure to be here today with you. So let's kick off really with why a board of high performers does not guarantee a high performing board. And this to me is so often, you know, people don't understand why they're struggling, and the board may be dysfunctional in some aspects. And I think we mentioned governance, methodology, Caroline earlier. And there's a confusion between understanding everyone around the boardroom table is so fantastic and such a high performer and brilliant at what they do versus a board that is actually delivering on what they're being asked of and tasked with. So what for you, why do you think there is this situation, why we sit in this space? You want to kick off, Kat?
Sure. So I think, I mean, my board experience has been quite limited. I sat on a board before, but I was quite young and didn't really feel like I had my voice. And so this board now is something that I'm sort of coming into my own with. But I think if I apply a lot of sports analogies to business, and I think you can have fantastic footballers or rugby players together in one team, but actually they can't perform on the pitch. And if the coach or manager is not actually doing their role and interfering, then it also interrupts. So I think, you know, bringing high performing people from all the different respective backgrounds, et cetera, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to actually be a good fit together. And I think, you know, a couple of things that I've sort of heard from other people and maybe seen in my limited previous experience was actually the culture didn't allow them to really bring their full self to the table and to actually have a voice to share what they wanted to share. And so therefore you might have had a great performer, but a silent great performer is not really very useful. And I think also, you know, sitting with my mentoring hat on, you know, I think some boards that I've seen have been very transactional in nature. And I believe in the human relationship and having the relationship bond people together and teams together. And so I think where I've seen it not work is when it's purely focused on the transaction and there's no relational aspects coming into the mix.
Absolutely. What your thoughts, Caroline, on that?
I couldn't agree more with Kate. I think in the past, and I think we should agree that as the world of work as business, the science of business is becoming more of an art than a science. And therefore, a lot in business, what is required recently across industries, besides the technical know-how that has driven board appointments in the past, is becoming an issue of character. It's becoming an issue of culture, of values alignment. And those are the things that make a team work. You know, is the understanding of how you infuse different energies and diverse skills and competencies in a way that is simple, but very smart. And I think that's what companies are struggling with, boards are struggling with. It's some organizations are still stuck in the old traditional way of doing business management and leadership, whilst times have evolved. And so you find a very high performing individual, highly skilled, extremely qualified and competent, very well spoken, and you put them in a board and they completely an anomaly, and that board just can't function. And it's simply because of the element that we're not harnessing the people component that allows for the seamless ability for people to gel. And I love the fact that there are different programs today that tries to identify that, you know, to ensure that we put together different energies at the board level. But I think fundamentally, what should govern, in my view, appointing boards into the future is the element of people, of leadership, people skills, because the skill component, the technical know-how, it's easy to source. But the human aspect is not easy to resolve. So there's one that is easy to solve and the other is not easy to resolve. And so boards are struggling with high-performing individuals that just cannot work together because of human connection.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And you know, it also depends on that board, because you might be sitting around a boardroom, and we know that directors, or in a boardroom, every director is equal. And often, you know, you're sitting in a situation where you've got stakeholders, or there's, you know, shareholders that have a presence on a board, and there's an expectation, and there's a lot of challenge occasionally as well. And it's about respecting the process and respecting that there has to be a natural balance and a well-balanced board in order to be effective a board, to be an effective board. And that comes down to the people. And I think probably, Caroline, you may even be referring there to, you know, we at Sirdar use the contribution compass, which is a individual and team profiling tool. But it's about understanding why boards make the decisions they do and how they make the decisions they do. And it's important about having that balance on the table of each individual bringing their own natural energy to it. So it definitely makes good sense. And I think this kind of leads quite well into the question we had about what makes an effective board for you. And so much of this is around the people, because for me, when I look at it, you know, whether you're a small business or a larger entity, there's a reality around using methodologies, using processes and practices that have been proven as successful, and engaging with them. And enterprise governance as a performance enhancement tool is well researched and documented. So we need to look at that. And I think there's three key elements in really unlocking the implementation of good governance. And that's where the board sits, and it's selecting the appropriate directors. And that's why we're here today, to look at that. And then following a defined methodology and applying an effective process. And so today, it's that to me is three areas to look at. And the key one being selecting the appropriate directors for the time and the place and where your business sits now to take you into the future. And I think that more than anything we've seen over the last year and a half with COVID and the impact of COVID. You know, businesses have thrived and some have not survived. What are your thoughts around that?
So I don't know, Caroline, if you want to jump in or.
Yes, I can jump in. Yeah, what makes an effective board of director, in my view? I think, so firstly, we spoke about why high-performing individuals don't necessarily form a high-performing board. And it's very critical that when we're selecting board members, that we're not focused on just the technical component. I think that's the first. So for me, a effective board of director, I am no longer of the school of thought that I need a CFO on the board to handle necessarily the intricacies of a successful balance sheet and driving a financially successful organization. And I'll tell you why. So using that particular analogy to respond to that question of effectiveness, there is something at the board level which is not often spoken about, called the ability for sound judgment calls, the ability to make sound decision under pressure. And here's where a lot of technically sound people sometimes miss it, is that there is no school to teach sound judgment necessarily. And often when you go for an interview, there are skills matrices that seek to determine if an individual that is professional and a leader can make sound, good decision under pressure and with little or no information, and even during chaos. And what we find is that technocrats are not often sound because they apply every technical reasoning as opposed to socio-human reasoning, what drives a holistic and what we call a sustainable organization. And so in my view, I really want to start with that. I think what makes for an effective board member is one who is able to make quick, sound decision under utmost pressure with little or no information, but make decision that is right for the people of the organization and for the business moving forward, not only in the present, but into the future. And that is a combination of skill set that is not necessarily taught often, because what we have society have harnessed for a long time is compliance by ticking the box and not by culture. And so I believe that a lot of the things we've been looking for in board of directors can be taught, but that character and good judgment cannot necessarily be taught. It's something that you have to, either with experience, a lot of failing and learning, and making mistakes and redeeming yourself from that. And I think that's for me the first one. We have to begin to choose individuals that have demonstrated through their career the ability to make sound judgment. I mean, Beverley, you would know in South Africa, we've had, in the past just 5 years, we've had a series of example of directors who showcased inability to make sound judgment, not even rocket science decision, like simple decision. You know, from SA to Steinhoff to.
Losing your touch there.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can there.
Oh, there you
Yes,
go.
I think what we've
I'm
learned,
back.
we've
Okay.
learned what an effective board isn't. That's for sure. Were you there, Caroline? We missed you for a moment.
Am I back from your part?
You are.
Can you hear me again? I'm so sorry, guys. I'm in the free state, and here connectivity is not a very good relationship sometimes. I mean, I have to massage them a bit more. So yeah, I think I was saying one of the first things for effective boards is put together individuals that have demonstrated sound judgment in their career, besides just their technical know-how. They put individuals that have demonstrated good leadership. Demonstration of good leadership in desperate time and in difficult situations. Because your demonstration of good leadership is not for when business is thriving, it's when business is actually failing. That is the leadership test. And so without taking up too much time, I'll let Kat weigh in. I think at least those two for me would stand out before anything else.
Great, thank you. And I totally agree. I mean, having just gone through the process we've gone through, I think both of those were things that we were looking for. I think in terms of, defining an effective board from our perspective, it was also around, like any good ecosystem, having diversity is key. And it's not diversity, which, yes, it's about gender. Yes, it's about cultural background. But for me, it's also around age or intergenerational diversity. It's also around, we work across, for instance, a lot of different territories. So it's making sure that people on the board actually understand, have lived there, understand the cultural nuances, understand how people tick, what are the unsaid, sort of norms in the country that we need to be aware of, so that there is that applicability. And I think it's also around, sort of making sure that there is that variety of the conversation around the table. I've definitely chosen, and Beverley, you mentioned it earlier, in terms of sometimes the conversations can be a bit sticky. That's what I'm seeking. I'm seeking the stickiness because I know that coming out of the stickiness is going to be something great. But it's making sure that people are also comfortable and feel encouraged to actually be able to have the sticky conversations. I think that's also important. And I think the other part is actually people in terms of an effective board, is people understanding what they're really there to do, and making sure that there is clarity and alignment around expectations, around roles and responsibilities, around capacity, and not then potentially getting into an abusive situation where people feel that someone's taking advantage of, but actually, having those conversations up front and then living to what has been agreed. I think in terms of, how we've looked at building our effective board, that's really two of the other additional things that we've brought in.
And Beverley, if I may just add two more things. I think building an effective board, we have to move from individual skills, the identification of individual skills, to collective skills. I think organizations need to deliberately and intentionally design what is the collective skill that we want on the board, and how do we pull that out, and how do we harness that, going into the future, because it has to move away from individual skills to collective skills. That's also what makes for an effective board. I just wanted to add that. And another one, which without, no matter the business you're in, that you cannot run away in this dispensation, is a board that is familiar with technology. And I find that technologically sound, whether as a user but as a good user, we have to now begin to build. I think those days when we had board members who had no idea about, as they say, born before technology or something like that, we need to now begin to harness. That came to mind as Kate spoke about intergenerational diversity, right? So the diversity is not just in gender, in skill set and all of that, but also in diversity in skill set, and that's what brings the collective skill of the board. So I just wanted to add those two components, so that even those that are not in technology, because sometimes we talk about technology, board members often think you're speaking to an industry that is in technology. That's necessary. No, whatever sector you're in today, you use some form of technology, and it's definitely to the advantage for an effective board that they are familiar and skilled with technological know-how.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. You know, even last year, it was a CEO summit, and I moderated a conversation around boards in the digital era. And it's not about, as you said, it's not about being the specialist in the room that understands IT or the digital space, but it's about having that presence and understanding within that boardroom and the thought behind it when you're looking at business moving forward. Because you might have a board that's very well established with amazing people on that board, and they've been sitting on that board for 10 years. We have to go, is this still an effective board in today's environment and where we are looking to go today? And that's pretty hard when you're passionate about it and you're on that board and you're adding value and you feel, but you need to ask yourself, how much value am I adding now? And it does become that diversity of thought. And we also need to understand that our markets change as businesses. Our markets, our stakeholders are very different. Our teams are very different to what they were 5-10 years ago. Are we keeping up with it? Do we understand where we need to be going and looking at the future? So it's that whole, I agree absolutely with you. The diversity of thought that brings good strategic thinking, foresight, and for everyone around that table to have a good understanding of what governance is. And whether you're new to it and you've done your director training and applied director training, so you're bringing that to the fore, or you are learning along the way. That happens. We've all had to do it. No one teaches you how to be a director. But it's that, what do we bring? And what do we bring as a collective? So absolutely, I agree with you. Anything else, Kat, that you wanted to mention around this effective board?
I think for me, again, going back to my point earlier, everything for me is about, it's not about a transactional relationship. I think, one of the things that I was very conscious of when I was bringing the board members in to our board recently was actually to really look at what are they looking to learn by being on the board, and making sure that they're gaining something by being part of our journey, but also having the relationships with us. And so I think if there's sort of skin in the game and you're gaining something, I think you're naturally going to lift your own game up, especially if you're surrounded by other people who are really good at their game. And so I think the effectiveness is really around everyone coming to the table with what their gifts are, what their uniquenesses are. But then actually, exactly as Caroline, you mentioned the collective, but then what is everyone taking of value from themselves, as part of the process, in terms of learning, in terms of growth, in terms of, just building their own network as well.
And that plays very much a part about the interest, because why are you sitting there around the boardroom table? Is it because I'm going to make X amount and it's great because this is my third non-executive director role? Or is it because you are there because you want to add value? You want to see, as a non-executive director, your role is to see the success and the sustainability of the company that on whose board you sit. And that is your primary interest. It's not about shareholders. It's not about operational issues. It's about being able to drive it at a strategic level. So makes good sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, that really almost takes us into, in sort of many ways, sort of looking at really the other things that are important about an ideal director, because we've spoken about diversity of thought, and diversity absolutely comes across in terms of age, race, gender, skill sets. But all of that brings into the room diversity of thought, and we can't get away from that nowadays. And it's almost like an onion when you look at it, I think, where you start with the values of a company, which is so important. And so many companies don't really want to even touch on that. You know, when they're saying we're looking for a director, let's not list the values, because maybe we get the perfect person with the skills we want, but, you know, maybe not quite aligned. That's dangerous. That's like 101 director. So in terms of defining our ideal director, it's those values, and then looking at the the core skills, the specialist skills, and very much around that whole personality profile, that balance. You know, what would you say when you were looking, Kat, and you went through this whole process of interviewing, I don't know how many people, to really fine tune your board? What would you define as an ideal director or directors?
Well, I think, I mean, the ADP program helped in this to put a little bit of structure into a bit of an unknown game for us. You know, we're a very values-driven company. So the first thing we had on our sort of board JD was our purpose and our values, because it's like, if you don't buy into that, thanks very much. We don't really think there's a fit. I think the way that, you know, I look at even my team, let alone the board, is, you know, how do we get everybody who has got something very unique around the table to come together? And so we're looking at what is, based upon where we're heading, what is the unique thing that we're looking at from different people? I think, you know, in terms of, I often look at it as a litmus test of, do I want to be sat up at 2 a.m. in the morning working with this person to solve a problem that I know will come down the line at some point? Will I feel, you know, sort of comfortable that they have my back, the business's back, and each other's back? You know, that's something that's really important for me. And I think it's also, you know, our board members are volunteer. Board members, they're not being paid, and so hence that learning exchange is something really important for me. But I think, you know, in terms of the ideal board director, I think it's them realizing that every seat is priceless, you know, and so they need to be showing up every time that we need them to. We're not going to abuse their time, but when we do ask for their time, it's like show up with everything in, you know, their energy as well as their skills, and coming as the whole person into that. I think we also looked at, from a blend perspective, not everybody who came on the board, you know, we have some quite younger people coming into the board, and we knew that they might not have a lot of board experience, but we knew that other people would compensate for that, and therefore one of their learnings would actually be to grow with that, and so therefore that was something we could offer. So yes, it was an understanding of roughly what their compliance related governance responsibilities are, but it wasn't a prerequisite that everybody had to have that. And then we used the contribution compass as a way to just understand who we have around the table, where there might be a strong bias, where we're missing. And really, I'm an energies person anyway, so I kind of really appreciated that as a framework and a structure. So that was really, for me, what the combination of an ideal director was, which is quite a long answer to a very short question. But I hope it covers everything.
No, I mean, it's absolutely vital, you know, that we understand what makes for a great director. And so often we miss points along the way. You know, you're so busy seeing some fantastic person who you feel honored that they're prepared to sit on your board, and you're not asking the hard questions around it, and you're not diving deep into why they actually are right for your board. So
absolutely,
it is absolutely important. What are your thoughts? Yeah, sorry. Kate,
sorry, just better to finish. I think also one can get a bit intimidated by people's profiles. So I think really trying to see the person behind the title or behind the name, or what, you know, whatever that may look like. But also I think one of the things we really made sure of, which maybe comes a little bit later, is actually making sure that there was no conflict of interest by being on our board, and, you know, kind of ironing those out up front so that there weren't any nasty surprises down the line.
absolutely key, because it's pointless going on a journey with someone only to find out at the end they're not right. Or, for example, they don't have the capacity to commit themselves to the number of board meetings, the number of committee meetings, pre-board meetings, etc. Absolutely. Caroline, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm hoping my connection is moving. I think Kate nailed a series of good points in her response there, which I really completely agree with. I'd just like to add maybe 2 more points. The first being that in identifying an effective or an ideal director, it's not a tension between skills and human ability. I think businesses must recognize that those two must coexist, and it must coexist well and purposefully. So the one critical component I would add to what Kate has indicated is a director who, out of the boardroom, demonstrates purpose, a sense of purpose for themselves. And then there's a fit, there's an alignment fit, the purpose of that organization, which is beyond the values, right? So, because often what you find, individuals that demonstrate judgment, all these human qualities that we're seeking to identify, that makes us culture, that gives us this difference in energy. Those with a sense of purpose that is beyond self, that is greater than themselves, tend to understand why and what they want to fit with. You know, why are they contributing to this organization? Why are they interested in this board? What would be their role? So there's an ability, as you say, foresight for those individuals who demonstrate sense of purpose to find a fit and alignment within specific organizations. So I think that is critical. When you find a board member or an individual who beyond their professional skills, basically want to identify the alignment and the fits for your board. So I would say that's the first indication of an ideal director in my view. And as I say, the skills and the human connection should not be in competition. They should go hand in tangent, because what businesses have tended to look at, it says, oh no, I'll compromise on this one who probably is very skilled, but has great human connection. No, there are individuals with great human connection and skilled in that particular area. It's not a compromise. So I think that's just what I wanted to add to what Kate has indicated, because it is definitely not a transaction. It's about transformation, transforming the individual and transforming the organization. And those two should never be traded for something else. So that's what I just wanted to add. I'm loving this, by the way.
Absolutely, and so valuable, Caroline. Absolutely. I think it makes such a, we must not, when we are appointing directors, we mustn't, I'm not going to say take second best, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying about looking and understanding what you really do need in that position, and looking for that. And not to be swayed by the fact that someone's fantastic on another board without looking at your board. And something that we often look at as Sirdar when we're looking to appoint directors, we say it's not essential that that person comes from your industry, because often the specialists in that industry are sitting around the boardroom table. What you're looking for is the plus. When I look and I do a diagnostic or I do assessment of my board, what are we missing? What is it that's going to add the value to the people at that table and to the organization? You know, so these are the kind of things that we need to look at, and it's about being able to bring that all together and have someone sitting in the room. And that's sometimes absolutely, you know, that's where you'll need a board specialist, or you'll need someone who really knows what they're doing, or to have completed, like Kat did, the applied directorship program, and have a clear idea as to what's going to make an effective board at the end of the day. And, you know, Caroline, you've sat on so many boards. You've seen where boards are dysfunctional. You've seen where boards are absolutely fantastic. Just in terms of general conversation, I mean, We can see that when we look at the Zonda Commission, etc. So we do learn all the time. And at the end of the day, we can't make excuses anymore as a director. We can't go, I didn't know, because that doesn't count. So nowadays it's about making sure you're bringing those right people on into the boardroom to start with. Anything else around that before we almost dive into these 5 essential steps for the board appointment process? Nothing. Okay, so for me, and I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are around this. But I've got 5 things that I sort of look at in the board appointment process. Kat, you've just gone through this. Caroline, you see the process happening as well all the time. So for me, the first one is really understanding your board, whether it's a newly formed board or an existing board. And we can deep dive into that. It's the director spec, so drawing up the specification of the individual, which we've spoken about before you start. And then a focused search and selection, a smart, intelligent search and selection stage. 4th would be the interviewing stage. Because often, I mean, we've all seen it. Often when you're new to interviewing for the board, or it's a new person interviewing for an established board, are you asking the right questions? It's not a standard interview. It's very much about engagement and learning from each other about what one can bring to a board and understanding what the board can offer. And then finish off as you mean to go. And when I talk about finishing off as you mean to start, it's a well-defined appoint process to actual close, to registration, to signing of the non-executive director agreements, and they're really good, proper induction. Because that is invaluable in order to support the new person coming on board as well, and to support the board as a whole. So that's the 5. And everyone watching, what we'll certainly do is we will send you the 5 that we've got, those essential steps. And starting with that, understanding your existing or new board. So we look at it and we go, let's do a board effectiveness assessment or a board readiness assessment. Because at the end of the day, you need a good understanding of your current environment. And so often boards are they know what's happening in the boardroom, but you kind of gloss over it. And suddenly when it's in black and white and going, okay, these are the areas of governance that you could be looking at. These are the areas that could be improved on. These are the areas that are fantastic. When you've got that in black and white, it adds value because then it's something to work on and off. What are your thoughts around that?
Do you want to go, Caroline, or shall I?
I guess we're kind of waiting for each other, right? I was thinking,
I know.
I'm going.
Bring it out there.
We'll do a secret sign.
Yeah. Well, I can. I think, Beverley, you've outlined it quite nicely. I mean, I think Sirdar outlines it quite nicely. And I just want to expand maybe just a little bit on the first process, which is understanding your board. I mean, as you know, we work with organizations. I mean, I have been I am not a financial expert. I'm not a chartered accountant or anything, or a lawyer, but I've sat in several boards of diverse organizations, from financial services to you name it, right? And I think what is critical, even in understanding your board or before that, is understanding the DNA of your organization. What is the, as an integral part of understanding the board is what makes, and this is not about perfection, because as we know, there are no perfect businesses. There are businesses that are growing and thriving and improving in different segments of their businesses progressively over time. Okay, so this is not about having an business that is perfect and sorted out and settled by any means, but it's just understanding that whilst we are in this journey, we are at this stage. This is what makes us appealing, and these are the areas where we need support. Transparency in understanding the DNA of your organization is a major gap, often in board appointment processes. And you often find that when then board members are appointed, it's as if this information comes in drips and drops, right? You read all the glossy things in every board pack, but there's just little nuances unwritten here and there that come in afterward to cloud what is presented before you. And I think understanding the DNA of the organization for shareholders or founders is really critical. And I like the way Kate presented it, because it's saying that this is who we are. We don't just write this down at the entrance, at our reception store. This is our very DNA. This is who we are. This is how we want to be known, show up. This is how we interpret our existence. And this is what we're aiming for, okay? If the impact, the DNA of your organization is making money, be very clear about that. So your board of directors know that this is about profit, full stop. You know, we're not here for mixing, no. And if your DNA is about impact, about touching and changing lives, make that also very clear. Because then you ensure that you align purpose and fit of individuals because of that clarity. So I would really want to emphasize that, because I think often we go through all the right steps, but because we miss this at the beginning, and you find that just somehow there's not enough clarity, right? You say one thing, but the person hears another, and you mean something different, because that's just nuances that exist in the boardroom. So I really want to emphasize that, because I've been a victim of that. I may be a perpetrator, who knows? Some other board member might find me a perpetrator. But I think that is really critical, because when I understand the DNA of an organization, there are times when you make decisions and say, hang on, we want profit. But remember, our clear mission is not just profit. So we need to find a way, that collective understanding needs to be there. And I just wanted to emphasize that at the beginning. And the rest of it, definitely, there's some level of ensure that what is cut across. I want to talk about cut across principles in this process. And the first one is transparency. Because when organizations are not transparent to their potential recruits, already you've started that whole process on the wrong footing. And I think Kate clearly said that we didn't want, this was not about a transaction for them, and I just want to say, for any director out there, there are no perfect boards or perfect businesses. I mean, they could be perfect, but maybe when you and I get in there, we just make it imperfect, because we are all imperfect people. So the clarity of understanding that there's no utopia, but transparency throughout that process, from the organization to the potential candidates and vice versa, is a critical component to ensuring that these 5 steps, we produce what is really helpful. So I think I just wanted to add that to the 5 steps, and I'll hand this over to Kate. Kate, maybe you might have, given that you've just gone through it, you might have something more recent.
Were you part of our interviews? Because I think that really says exactly what we sort of, we're aiming for. So I'm hoping that that's how we came across as well. I mean, I think, a little bit of also, together with the transparency, a little bit of vulnerability as well. When we were doing the interviews, was actually saying we don't have everything sorted. We are still working our way through things, given the changes outside, but also just the nature of where we are in our growth, as an organization. But also showing that we're okay to be vulnerable and say we don't know when we don't know, because that then gives everybody else the permission to actually feel useful and share their insights, etc. So I definitely agree with clarity and transparency, and I think the vulnerability I'd add in as well. And I think reflection is very much a part of who we are as an organization. So your point around the DNA. And so we actually took quite a lot of time to reflect upon who are we today, where do we want to go, and who do we need to accompany us on that journey and to really guide us. And so I think for anybody listening, don't be afraid to do that reflection and that prep thinking, because actually I believe it sets you up to then gain the clarity. And then once you have the clarity of the vision, it then attracts in naturally who you're looking for. So yeah, but I can't really add on much because you've said it perfectly.
But absolutely, because that is it. And that's really about understanding a board where you sit, being honest. As you say, the transparency,
absolutely.
Because it's pointless bringing people on if they don't understand that this is the current situation in the board. It might be that you have some voices that are louder in the boardroom. You might have it that there's some issue. Tell people, because when you want the right people to be in that boardroom with you, or on the Zoom meeting, today's world, with you. So yeah, it is absolutely essential. And on the reverse of that, every non-executive or prospective non-executive director should be doing their due diligence on a business. And that includes asking about board culture. It includes asking about values. It includes about asking where you're at as a business. Because it takes two to tango at the end of the day. So very, very important. And actually, Kat, you've moved straight along in terms of being able to build that and show yourself as who you are as a business and a board, into drawing up a director spec or a specification that then is reflecting of what you need. It's got to be comprehensive. It's going to speak of the values, the core skills, the specialist skills, the personality profile of the ideal person to balance that board out, and to own it and say, this is what we're looking for.
Absolutely. And I think, again, in terms of transparency, to also be transparent, the fact that what are our expectations of people joining our board, and not shying away. If we're saying that we're looking for X number of hours, this is what we're looking for. If, we're not going to judge if you don't have the capacity, and we said that up front before we even spoke to people, because again, we're trying to be effective here as in our recruitment process, and efficiency is part of that for me. And I think the other one is around, sort of board terms. We set that up right up front in terms of remuneration, in terms of rotation, in terms of the, the tenure and then the rotation principles, etc. So again, we didn't want to, I don't like surprises when I'm, going through these processes. So the more that we can eradicate that and actually, sort of show people that, we mean business here, when we're not here to waste people's time, and therefore, we then attracted that sort of respectful level back as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think if I can just add, Kate, I also don't like business surprises. I like birthday and gift surprises, but when it comes to business, no surprises, please. So I couldn't emphasize that any further. I just wanted to add that on the last component, when it comes to finishing as you start, which is the DNA issue, is also important in the board orientation. I think I see board orientation almost like buying a house. And I think often what happens in board orientation is that businesses tend to treat it as, again, a tick box exercise. Now, nobody buys a house as a tick box exercise. You would have thought of your financial circumstances, you'd have thought of the location, you have drilled every aspect of what you want, why you want it, and everything else. And I really want to encourage both directors joining new boards and businesses hiring board members that if you fail at anything in this recruitment process, please don't fail at orientation. Because to the extent to which you orientate the board member, that's how serious that board member will be, will remain, and will contribute. Because that is your first pitch of who the organization is to a board member. Forget the interview and everything else. Those are like vessels and whistles and frills. But the board orientation is your first demonstration of who the board is and the effectiveness or the dysfunctionality or whatever it is of the board that culture, because that introduction literally will tell you what you will get going into the future. And I really just want to encourage businesses to take board orientation extremely seriously. As I said, it should be as if you're buying a house and as an agent selling a house to a potential buyer, because that is a critical step of an effective board, an effective board member.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to take, I know we're sort of running a little bit towards it, but we'll allow for a couple of minutes around Q&A. So we'll certainly allow for that. But I think it's important we finish off this discussion around these steps in the board appointment process. And one of those things, and if you're watching and you're going, well, I'm kind of not sure, or what is a high performance director, or what is an effective director, what is an effective board? just for a basic, don't do a workshop. Go into a workshop like a high performance director workshop. Go and do, or high performance board workshop. Go and do something like that, because it's going to take like 8 hours or 6 hours out of your day. But there's going to be learnings from that you can then take away, reflect on, and start going, hang on a second. You know, I was speaking to someone the other day that did that, and they said, oh, you know, we're in the process now of finalizing our board and moving forward. But we've realized we're calling people directors that aren't directors. We've realized that we're doing this. We've realized that we haven't got process and methodology in place that's going to support what we do as well. Because so often you're in a situation where you say, okay, we're going to have a board, and that's great, but what are you going to do? What do you understand about what the board has to deliver to the business on? So that's really important. And I think one of the things that we look at, you know, we've looked at now drawing up this whole spec. That was your point 2. I think we mustn't forget about the search and selection and the interviewing, because your search and selection is, where are you going to? Are you just getting referrals? Are you just getting like someone who knows someone, or your consultant? Are you going to a board specialist or someone that's going to go like, okay, let's take the emotion out of this and pull together the right people for you? Are you in your process, whether you use someone outside your business or not, but in your own nomination process and appointment process, is it something standard? Is it consistent? And is it going to deliver what you need at the end of the day? You know, so important. And not everyone looks at that.
Absolutely. I think, you know, my first thing was, oh, I've got so many great friends who do amazing things, let me talk to them. But then, you know, sort of the rule that my father always taught me is never mix business and pleasure. So I was like, okay, where do I go if I can't go there? And so we did a phenomenal, like, to be very honest, a really, you know, phenomenally large search on LinkedIn, trawling through all of our different LinkedIn networks and mapping them against, I mean, this Excel spreadsheet was fantastic as a result. And then reached out to, you know, yourself, Bev, and also another network that I'm part of called The Room, to really help us source candidates that were going to be fit for what we're looking for, but also outside our spheres, you know, because even though LinkedIn is, you can still say there are people who you know through people, but they're still within a sphere. And again, if we were looking for diversity, we wanted to have people who really weren't in our sphere and actually expand that out. And what was interesting, I remember being asked by one of my board members, why aren't we circulating this on social media? You know, and I was like, well, to be honest, I actually like the recommendation aspect. I like people saying to me, we recommend this person, because I trust my friends or my network to tell me if I should or shouldn't be engaging with someone. And then also the likes of Sirdar, right, who's going to say to me, you know, these are the people that we would recommend based upon who's applied. And so I think, again, trying to fast track what is a long process and making sure that you're kind of going up in the trusted advisor status so that you can bypass all of the other noise, I think is really important.
Thank you. Absolutely. I can't agree more with you. And Caroline, your experience, I mean, you've sat on a number of boards, you know, you've seen how it goes through. How have you been approached? Because often it is about referrals. We understand that. How have you found your engagement or being engaged by others?
Yeah, I think by and large, I've been very privileged in my years of experience as a board member. I think mostly it's been largely referral. Again, Sirdar has played a huge part of that. I mean, because again, partly when you understand not only the skill component of the individual, but you understand what their values are, their stance ethically, you understand their human abilities. So there's a lot that when you give a reference, you're not just saying, I know an individual, you're really talking about the full, the knowledge of what you've experienced, right? And I think that's what Kate was speaking to, which is really, really critical. But you mentioned something, Beverley, and I really want to talk to that. I mean, there are also practical do's and basics in being an effective director, in appointing a director, that we also should not brush over. And I think whilst we've talked at length and at depth about the human qualities, and both from a business perspective, but also from the individual, I think they're just also simple, practical to-dos that you must look out for. An individual who is studious, so somebody who takes time to study things, who wants to understand, who seeks understanding, not just knowledge, seeks knowledge, but understanding. You see that there's a fundamental difference. Who seeks to understand Kate, for example, to understand Mowgli, to understand EndlessLife, to understand things, and not just interpret based on knowledge only. And I found that in all the boards I've sat, creating platforms to understand your board members beyond the boardroom, makes decision making that could take 5 hours done in 30 minutes, because then you suddenly begin to, and these are basic teamwork principles we all know, right? Instead of spending 5 hours deliberating on a board decision, I mean, that could easily take, when you understand how I think, how I make decisions, what I'll definitely push back on, it makes a lot better. And I think those are things where in like step 2 for interviewing, but you really want to tease out what kind of questions do you want to ask to give you to direct you to the answers that you're looking for in a potential candidate. To add on just on the element of an effective director itself, you must study, you must be prepared. The worst thing is to show up in a board meeting without knowledge of what was done in the previous board and what is being discussed in the current board. Okay, if have conversations with other directors before the board meeting, preferably with the chair, depending again on the culture of the board, because some boards are not necessarily as traditional as every other organization, and that's fine. That's their company or business culture. Have conversations before the board about the agenda, so that there are certain issues you don't need to belabor within the boardroom. You've thrashed out, it doesn't need 2 minutes, you've understood where you're going to. Certainly have a board charter. There must be parameters, frameworks that govern how you make decisions. How long you deliberate on issues. What are you guys in the business or the circle in the business that you're discussing at every given quarter or every board sitting? So there are certain disciplines within being a director that cannot be forfeited because now you're a great leader or perfect human connectionist. Those disciplines must still be upheld as a matter of principle for effectiveness and for results. I just to add that.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. It is very much the human side of it. It's very much around methodology and it's around process. And when you bring the 3 together, that is when you can really drive through with an effective board. And thank you for that. I know we're running out of time. Firdaus, you were going to put up a poll. I'll be interested if you can do that for our participants as well, because really it's about for you listening and for your takeaways and where you see yourselves going as well. So if you can just in the next sort of couple of seconds just click on that and let us know what are your next steps in this whole process, because there's a value to us to understand where you come from and where you see yourselves going, because when we look at further webinars and topics, we can drive forward with those as well, because it's all about learning and growing together in a community where we sit in the boardroom and we sit in business and we all want to be successful and allow each other to be successful. Are there any questions at this point that you would like us to answer? Is there anything that, please put it up on chat or Firdaus can let us know that we can answer for you at this point? Anything there? Let me just see if there's anything coming up at the moment. Not at the moment. But I know we are going to be running out of time. So thank you very much for everyone that has joined us today. I want to say a special thanks to Caroline and to Kat. I really appreciate your energy. Oh, great. We've actually got up here. This is quite interesting. Just before I thank you, actions. There is around Okay, so it's actually quite interesting looking about learning, I think, looking about natural energy. That's a great conversation around balancing a board. And that doesn't happen enough when we're talking about board appointments and a conversation around that. So thank you very much. Kat, your learnings, please, share again with us around, you've written some fantastic articles on boards and setting up boards. Caroline, your value is, and as a non-executive director and a human, and just being able to make sense out of so much noise. I thank you for that as well. So you've both been fantastic, and thank you very much.
Thank you, and it's been great to be here, and I've learned a ton. So thank you so much to both of you for sharing your insights as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Likewise, thank you very much, both. Kat, it was wonderful meeting you. Beverley, you're always a star. Thank you for having us, and I really appreciate it. I look forward to future conversations. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, and thank you very much. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.